Hello, I'm Dash. I am a moderator of the Final Fantasy VII leaderboard on Speedrun.com. The other day, I was verifying a run live on stream, and I found a problem. I found the game doing something impossible, a cheat, if you will. And so it is time for me to. I gotta bring you guys through it. I gotta explain what I saw. So here we go. Let's get into it. The first thing I'm gonna show you here is we'll get into the technicals of why this is impossible later, but just to show it right away, I will very briefly explain what the problem is. And we'll get it again, we'll get into the technicals later that proves that this is impossible. So firstly, this run was performed by Tiki Liger. And as they're going through here, they get a battle right here. And what you're going to need to know is that the battle system in this game is completely understood, completely deterministic. This fight right here, totally fine. Nothing to see here. However, it's what happens after that is a problem. So here, they do some walking steps with Cloud in order to manipulate encounters, as we do. However, they do not take enough walking steps in order to underwalk, to get underneath. Well, you'll understand why I say underneath later. They do not take enough walking steps in order to avoid an encounter, but we'll see what happens. So, on the world map, this is a completely different battle system. So the way that random encounters are generated on the world map actually has nothing to do. It's a completely isolated system from what generates battles in dungeons, what we call fields, right? This, where there's a pre-rendered background and you're a little chibi character running around and you have cutscenes and talk to people, this we call the field, and it's field battles that we're concerned about here. So I'm just fast-forwarding this and to show that this is an unbroken segment, right? Because, yeah, the world map section has nothing to do with what we're talking about. The town section has nothing to do with what we're talking about. The snowboarding has nothing to do with it. It all happens when we get into the following dungeon here. So once we're done with snowboarding, here we go, little cutscene, and now here's what happens. So they run up this field, they run up this field, they run up this field. This field is where we have a problem. So I mentioned that they did not take enough walking steps. Final Fantasy VII, unaltered, an unaltered copy, untampered with copy of FF7, I am telling you, with authority, would produce a random encounter right here. Judging by their movement all the way up to this run so far, because again, they are using a movement route that I am very familiar with. It's the same movement route that I use when I do runs. And in verifying this run, I followed their movement all the way through the start of the run, all the way through here. It's very easy to do because they're following the same route that I use. And I am telling you definitively, Final Fantasy VII would have produced a battle right here due to their movement, and it just magically doesn't. Now, it does produce a battle several steps later. However, this battle is also expected. This one is the battle that we're trying to hit when we do the walking steps. So we'll see the technical reason as to why this is later, but basically, when we take the walking steps, it is in order to avoid this encounter and instead get this encounter. However, Tiki definitively did not take enough steps. So here, before we get into the technicals though, I gotta tell you the gossip, the juicy stuff. When I noticed this on stream, Tiki, sometime later that night, they must have heard that I found this live, because I was streaming live when I found this. This is crazy to get this fight right here. Call me suspicious of this. I was commentating the entire run live because I like to commentate runs, and talk about what's going well, what's not going well, and like kind of teach about mechanics and stuff. So I found this live, but I had been streaming for over 9 hours. I was starving. I was like, all right, I'm going to look at this more tomorrow. And after that stream, before the next day, they deleted the submission off of speedrun.com and they deleted the video off of YouTube. However, because I was suspicious of the run, because I found something impossible in the run that the game can't do, I downloaded the video right away. Right away, I downloaded the video off YouTube to prepare for this. So I then did a follow-up stream where I went through it again. I asked everybody for their conclusions. Can anybody explain this in a way that I just overlooked? Did I overlook something? Is this a learning experience for me? No, nobody else can explain how this could have happened in an untampered with game. And here's the deal. During that stream, you know, when I was trying to give, right, the benefit of the doubt and saying, like, somebody explain this, please, Tiki deleted their entire YouTube channel. Now, clicking the YouTube link that's on this video has been removed screen will just take you to the front page of YouTube if you try to go directly to a video that's been deleted. But to show the channel being deleted, if you go to Tiki Liger's actual Twitch page, at least at the time of this recording, there is still a link to their YouTube channel itself. And there you can see, boom, this channel does not exist. So they run a ton of games, and every single one of them now no longer has a YouTube video on speedrun.com. Or yeah, none of them have video evidence anymore because they deleted their entire YouTube channel containing all of their runs. Just nuked it, and also deleted their Twitter, and I heard that they left all the Discords of the games that they ran as well. I can only verify that they left the FF7 Discord. So I presented my my evidence, my technical evidence, to speedrun.com. Speedrun.com issued a ban, and that's where we are right now. Is now all of the mods of these games probably need to get updated that this happened. So maybe you're one of those mods. Maybe you are just a viewer here for the gossip. But either way, it is now time to get into the nitty-gritty technicals of why it is impossible and why we know it's impossible. If you are not interested in like nitty-gritty details and you want to get into like the stuff about like how I think they cheated, like how did they pull off the cheat, check out the YouTube chapters and just skip this next part if you want. I understand if you're not into the numbers, but okay, let's jump into it. So Final Fantasy VII's random encounter system on fields is totally understood, totally deterministic. Here's basically how it works: is they use a system called danger, where every 8 frames of movement, when you are moving Cloud in a hostile environment, which is just an environment that is not the world map that you can get into battles, every 8 frames the game will increment your danger level. And then it compares your danger up against a random number. And if your danger is above the random number, it generates an encounter. And then after an encounter, your danger resets back to 0. This is the way that the developers tried to make it so that you don't get into battles too frequently, because you'll have low danger after every battle. But you also can't go too long without getting a battle, because as your danger goes higher, it is more likely that you'll get into a battle. Now, I put more likely into quotes because the problem with this system, or like actually the neat thing for speedrunners, is that the list of random numbers that it checks against is the same list of numbers every time you press new game. So if you open Final Fantasy VII, this is the first screen in the game in which the danger system activates. Funny enough, if you go, this is the screen after the first screen. Cloud jumps off the train, you fight one battle that's scripted, and then you enter this room. if you go back into the first room, it actually will have random encounters. We're not going to worry about that for a speedrun. So you can try this right now at home. Boot up FF7, press new game, do the first battle, run into this room, okay? Follow along with me. If you make real tight movement, ooh, I gotta unpause it. If you make real tight movement around this corner and run to these guys, run to these bozos, you know, name Cloud, and then name Barrett. All right. And then on this screen, go upright, make real tight movement around this and to the left and into this door. And then you go up. You will get an encounter. We're going to go real tight around this corner as well. And you're going to get an encounter right here. There it is. So we know the encounter system. Okay. So now we'll talk about, like, right away, you can imagine that speedrunners, knowing that it's all essentially pre-planned, we have created a step route, which is like assuming optimal movement as much as possible. How can we kind of manipulate the encounters in order to optimize our playthrough? Well, we get into walking steps. So how it works is every 8 frames when the game increments your danger, if you're walking instead of running, the game will only increment 1/4 as much danger as if you were running. The thing is, though, it still goes every 8 frames. So the list of random numbers that you're comparing against are still getting burned through at the same rate. You're just only getting 1/4 as much danger. And so what we can do with that information, we're going to look at this neat little tool called Big Shoes that was made by Ace Zephyr, which is a visualizer of what's happening. So first of all, I mean, we can just continue this game only enough to show you the danger reset to 0. And so here's how Big Shoes works is if we are running, we follow the dark blue line, and if we're walking, we follow the shallow green line. This is our danger increasing as we would move, and then these bars coming down are encounter checks. Like right here, for example, this is a low one. If your danger is, it looks like about 500 or more, you get into a fight here. This one is as well. This one's like 900 something or more, you get into a fight. And the thing is, there's a battle check on every step. If we were to zoom out here, you can see that there's checks on like every step. It's just that so many of them are so high that we don't even need to graph them. So here we go, and as we move, you can see we're following that dark blue line, but now if we start walking, now we're following the green line, and then we're following the dark blue line. Okay, great. However, I mean, we just get into this encounter once we hit it. Big whoop. All right, well, here is where it gets good. Like, we'll take this room as an example. What I'm about to show you is not exactly what we do in a run, but it's a really good visual for what's happening. So we get into an encounter here, and then our danger resets to 0 once we get out of the encounter. Cool. So take a look. If we were to just run right here, we get into this encounter right away. These 2 encounters are very quick. So now I'm going to load. So this is after that first battle. So once again, after loading, if we run, encounter real quick. If, however, we walk like 1, 2.5 steps, now we get underneath that encounter. That's what I mean by underneath. And now we get all this movement before getting another encounter, just because we walked for like 2.5 steps. Why? Because this danger check, we only just barely hit it if we run, so we only need to follow the green line for a few danger checks before we can start following the blue line and pass under it. Once again, 1, 2.5, and look at that, we get underneath it, tons of movement. That is the basis of walking steps and how we use walking steps in order to manipulate encounters. And once again, you're not looking at a graph like this during the run. The way that it's actually used in a run is You just have to remember, after certain encounters, you take a certain number of steps. That's basically what it is. Every single encounter that we get, we know we're going to get it because it's in the route. We've routed it, that's just what the game decides, and so it's part of the route, and then maybe we have to take some walking steps in order to manipulate it a little bit. Boom, that's how steps work in Final Fantasy VII. Now, in order to understand this part of the game, though, there is an extra bit of complication. And this extra bit of complication is very likely why Tiki Liger, we'll get into why I think they made a mistake in their cheating that then made it obvious. During this part of the game, what you actually do is you just try to run straight forward through this room, and you get a battle somewhere in this fight, depending on somewhere in this room. Depending on how far or ahead you are on your route. And so, what do I mean by ahead or behind? Real quick, basically the idea is, okay, so I got this battle on this part of the movement. And basically, this part of the movement is, like I said, it is a certain number of frames of movement since the start of the game. Essentially, what we are looking at visualized here is a list of random numbers that the game goes through one by one every 8 frames of movement. And then the lines on the bottom are how our walking versus running lines up to that. But again, it's a list of numbers that gets churned through once every 8 frames. And that is from the start of the game. Every time that you leave a hostile environment, it basically just pauses. The next time you enter a hostile environment, it resumes. Probably worth real clearly specifying here that even your danger does not reset when you leave a dungeon and either go back to it or enter the next dungeon. Danger is unaffected. It also freezes in place. So that means that when we get an encounter, like we got this encounter right here like we expected, the thing is that ultimately happened after a certain number of frames of movement in hostile environments since the beginning of the game. So what that means, though, is if I'm kind of sloppy with my movement, like let's say I go kind of wide around my corners or something like that, or I don't know the fastest way to an exit or something, that means that I've spent more frames moving in those rooms, right? Which ultimately means that by the time I get to this room, I will have spent more frames getting here. That means that I won't be able to travel my cloud as far into space before I get the fight. If this is where you get the fight after X frames of movement, however, on this run, if I had been sloppy 30 frames worth of movement of slop in previous rooms, well then those 30 frames would have been expended in those previous rooms, meaning I don't have them in this room, and so we will get the encounter 30 frames back from here, right? Now, due to extra complicated reasons, it doesn't actually work out exactly that nicely, but that's the concept, and it's mostly true. So Cloud gets we would get the fight back here if we were that sloppy with our movement, and that is what we would call being behind. Oh shit, I'm behind the route. And the opposite is true. If I'm super tight on every character, I'm schmoovin', my movement has never been so godly, well then maybe we'll be able to get farther in this room before we hit that number of frames. And we get the encounter up here. So that's what I mean by ahead or behind. Now, this room has one more piece of technicality to it that makes it very complicated. And that is the fact that in this dungeon that we're in this hostile environment, the steepness of the damage curve is actually steeper than it is in the next dungeon. You accumulate more danger per tick in this dungeon than you do in the following dungeon. And that creates an interesting problem. Let's say that this is exactly where we've routed the step route. We've routed the step route to be right here, and and it takes X frames to get out of this room. Well, first, we're definitely going to have to take walking steps because we need to get under this encounter, but there's also something later that we need to take steps under that'll be explained in a moment. So, ultimately, we need to take 10.5 steps to get out of this room. However, what if I got the encounter back here? That would mean that I have this much extra time spent in the higher danger incrementation zone before we get to the low danger incrementation zone. And so that means that the 10.5 steps that I take here and then exiting is going to get me to just barely go under an encounter, because you don't want to overwalk, it wastes time, and because you're only moving 1/4 as fast as you should be for those frames, it also puts you behind. That's another really easy way to get behind, is if you walk too many steps. If one encounter you need to take 6 steps, but you take 7, that means that you took the 6 steps that the route required, and then for an entire step's worth of time, your cloud was only moving 1/4 of the distance that he should be. And so again, you won't get as far before you hit your next encounter. You're behind because you've walked too much. So again, the actual thing that's happening in this room, this is a real practice save that I've played up to. Right here, you would have to take 10.5 steps to get out of here. The thing is that 10.5 steps only barely underwalks an encounter, only barely avoids an encounter. So if we got our last encounter back here, that would mean that this extra danger incrementation right here, that's in the high danger zone, would raise our danger too much once we're in the low danger zone, and 10.5 steps is no longer enough. You have to counteract it by taking more walking steps if you're back here, and so allow me to demonstrate that right now. We got the encounter right here. I'll go back and we'll get it again to show it. So I run forward, we get the encounter right here, we escape the encounter, and then let me pop myself over here so you can see better. We take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.5. And if you're looking at the step graph, if you're really following along, you might be looking at the step graph and saying, oh, good job, you underwalked this encounter. However, that's not actually what we want, because once again, the next area that we get into is lower danger incrementation, and the steepness is going to change. So what I'm going to do is freeze all of my step stuff, my danger and my location and steps, because once again, when you leave a hostile area, this all pauses, and then it resumes the next time that we get into a dungeon. And so I'm going to freeze this stuff and then load the save state that's in the following dungeon. So nothing about steps in a run will have changed at this point. We just spawn into the next dungeon, and that's when steps are ready to continue. So pay attention to the graph over here if you want, and observe the danger incrementation change. Boom. So again, steps are exactly where we left off, and you'll notice that we are actually trying to underwalk this encounter right here. And so, to demonstrate what that encounter is, so this is how a run should look if we were not behind and we took 10.5 steps, and what you'll find is, doing a little bit of fast forwarding here to get through these load screens partly. So what you'll notice here, I'm going to stop. Like, you can just keep running, it doesn't matter, but I'm going to stop and just show that right here is the step ID on which I would have gotten the battle if I had underwalked, but I didn't. I walked the right amount, and so we keep going, and then we get the encounter where we want to get it, as I discussed earlier, which is in this room, and it's about right there. Steps are pretty good, so I got it pretty far into the room. So, as I'm trying to tell you though, when I run into this room, I'll show you right now. What if I got the encounter right here? So I'm gonna waste a bunch of movement. Oh no, now we're behind, and I'm way back here in the room. So you'll see if I take the same number of steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.5, and leave the room. Okay, now we will lock that step performance in place. warp to the dungeon, and now you'll see right here, I failed to underwalk this encounter because that extra amount of distance I had to cover in the high danger incrementation area raised our danger up enough where now, even though we've shallowed out, that wasn't enough steps. So you can see Big Shoes here is reporting that we're going to get into a fight, and so let's just demonstrate that real quickly. Alright, as we run up here, you'll see, oh no, we got a fight right there because we didn't walk enough steps. And so, let us recreate what Tiki did on Tiki's run. Once again, you can go back in the video if you don't trust my recreation here. Tiki got an encounter right here. Okay. And then what they did was they ran forward, and then they went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, almost 10 steps. They went ahead. Now, we lock that in place, teleport to the next dungeon, and you can see, kind of by a mile here, they do not underwalk it. The 5 indicates like it's like how many step IDs. It's like how many danger ticks need to be walking ticks in order to get under this. And so how many 8 frame increments, you know? Basically that means that you need 40 frames of walking essentially in order to get under this at this point. So that's not nearly enough steps. How many steps do you need to take? Well, I'm going to show you a pretty extreme example right now. So again, the fight happened right here. And so if we run in, I'm going to show you a pretty extreme example. Remember, they took 10, 9 and 3/4, 10 steps. If we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 steps, all right? I'm taking 12 steps. Even if you take that many, and now we teleport to the dungeon, even that is not enough. So the reason I'm showing you this is because now I'm going to show you, now we can say pretty definitively, if I get this encounter right here, as Tiki did, and I run forward, the minimum number of steps to take would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 and a half. 12 and a half steps is the amount that you need to take. And now if we freeze and we teleport, now you can see that successfully got under the encounter. But it gets even better. If you took 12 and a half steps, remember what I said, that walking only moves you 1/4 as far in space as running does, just like it only gives you 1/4 as much danger. If you were to take 12 and a half walking steps after already being behind, those 12 and a half steps put you way further behind. And so what happens if we're following the step graph is we get under the encounter right here, but then that encounter on the next screen that we're trying to get to, it has come so far back, we're so far behind that we now get it at the end of this screen. So if Tiki had taken the right number of steps to get under the encounter, it would have resulted in them being way behind and taking this encounter right here. But again, what did we see? We saw 9.5 steps, which then miraculously gave them their next encounter as if this encounter had just not existed for no reason. Okay, so let's get into how I think they cheated. I think it is really obvious. I think that they used this step visualization tool during the run, and I think that they used a RAM edit during the run. So how would that come to pass? Well, here's the deal. This room that we're getting into here is very notorious because of the reason that I've said before, you know, about the fact that you have to take a different number of steps depending on where you got your encounter it's a pretty unique thing in the run. It happens a couple times in the run, and it's very notorious each time. Runners need to like really practice these parts in order to figure it out. So much so that in my tutorial on part 40 of my comprehensive speedrun tutorial of exactly this route, I made this diagram that tells you how many steps to take depending on where you got the encounter that's in this room. Now, here's the problem, though, is Tiki didn't get the encounter in this run. He got the encounter in the previous room. And so maybe he just didn't know how many steps to take. And so this is my running theory, is that he was looking at this, he had this graph open, this visualizer, during the run. And when he got the encounter right here, he was like, I don't know how many steps to take. And so he came in here, and instead of even looking at the cloud and counting the steps, I think he was looking right here. I think he walked until this red dot disappeared and then hit X in order to start running. Let's see what that looks like. So you can look at the cloud if you want, count his steps, see if he takes like the 9.5, almost 10 steps that Tiki took. I am going to be just looking at this RAM visualizer in order to get underneath this encounter. Boom. Did it look something like that? So let's say that is what happened, using the RAM visualizer to get underneath this encounter. But here's the problem, right? Once again, the danger curvature changes going into the next dungeon. And if you were watching this, here's the thing, you don't get to see that until the snowboarding game starts. When the snowboarding game starts, boom, the graph updates, and at that point you see, oh shit, I wasn't trying to get under this encounter, I was trying to get under this encounter, and I didn't do enough. And so if I were cheating and I were looking at this during the run, because we're on emulator and this was an emulator run, then you could just pop over to your danger and just take like 200 danger off. Just poke a little bit of danger off. No one's gonna notice. It's just a little adjustment. No one's gonna notice that little change. And if you were to do that, then what would happen would be we took the number of steps that we took in the cave. We get to the snowfields. We magically don't get this encounter because someone poked our danger too low. And then we get the encounter exactly where Tiki got the encounter. The following encounter, that is. So that's how I think it was pulled off. One thing to remember, though, is the fact of the matter versus the conjecture, right? And so let me summarize now. The factual analysis is that it is impossible for Final Fantasy VII to produce the sequence of random encounters seen in Tiki Liger's run unaltered, with respect to their movement all the way up to that point. Sorry I didn't type that on the thing before. As in, an unaltered copy of FF7, an untampered with game, cannot behave the way that it behaved in their run. So, my conjecture is that it is very common practice in research, routing, and practice to use step visualization tools and RAM editors, namely Big Shoes and Cheat Engine. In fact, it's very common. Here is today, as of the recording of this video, today, here's our friend Neon Genesis, great runner of the game, check him out. He was doing some practice, and look at this. Oh, he's got the Big Shoes step visualizer, and he's got Cheat Engine up in order to in order to practice the step route, in order to learn the nitty-gritty details of the step route, the nuances of it, right? It's a great practice and research tool, but it would be trivial. It would be trivial for a bad actor to use these in a speedrun that's performed on emulator or PC, this was an emulator run. So I believe Tiki Liger did use Big Shoes during the run to assist in performing the step route and used a RAM editor in order to fix a mistake. I do have one extra little piece of corroborative evidence of using Big Shoes during the run, and allow me to go through it right here. So a little ways before this part of the run, the part of the run where I believe that they made the mistake, they had to cheat, and then their cheat is what made the game behave in a way that's impossible, thus they're caught, right? A little bit before that, they had another thing happen back here that just looked really suspicious, and so I just made note of this as I was watching, because I found it to be peculiar. This is really tinfoil hat, but I believe it corroborates the idea that they were looking at a steps visualizer. So here's what happens after they get into a fight here. So right here, we've talked about behind versus ahead already. If your steps are good at this part, on this part, you run up here, you run around a bend, and then up here and around. And if your steps are good, you get the encounter around the bend, like either here or around the bend here. Somewhere in here is good steps. So them getting this encounter right here is very behind. And so this might be the kind of place where someone who is on an otherwise good run, where, like, you know, they haven't game overed to any bosses yet, and that kind of thing, right? They might feel the need to take some performance enhancers now, because they're starting to get behind. They're starting to get so behind that they might lose their run to their steps being so bad, or so they think. You can sub 7 without steps at all. But anyway, here's where the peculiarity happens, though. So we get out of this fight, and what we see from the runner is they buffer walking steps out of this fight. This is a very odd choice, and I will explain why. The reason, the main reason, the reason people don't do this is because, let me pose the question to you. What step is this? What step is the cloud on right now? Is this step 3? Is this step 4? Is it step 1 or 2? Who knows? The screen was black while it started. Now, you could research this and find it out. You could research, how do I buffer my movement? If I buffer my movement out of encounters, what step is cloud on as the screen fades in? You could take the time to research that if you wanted. However, nobody does that because they come to a better conclusion. First, we'll talk about what a runner normally does. What a new runner normally does is they just wait for the screen. They just wait for the screen to become lit up, and then they start walking once they can see the cloud, and so that they can count the steps. But what an experienced runner who doesn't want to just stand around wasting time waiting for the screen to become brightened, and so they think of the idea of counting steps this way, what they end up coming to the conclusion of is, wait a second, you don't have to take the steps right away. Sometimes you do, but so you would do a practice run where you figure this out. A lot of encounters, most encounters, you can actually run out of the encounter, and then once the screen is lit up, then you start walking once you can see cloud, right? Every experienced runner will run out of an encounter and then stop and start walking once they can see cloud. Every inexperienced runner will wait for the screen to brighten and then start walking. It is possible to do this by mistake, though. I've done it by mistake. Sometimes I intend to wait for the screen to brighten and then start walking, but I'm just dumb and I make a mistake and I hit the D-pad too early, and then all of a sudden Cloud is walking behind a black screen. And when that happens to me, I go, oh fuck, where am I? What step am I on? And then I overwalk to be safe. I just take I kind of estimate it, and then I take like an extra step just to be safe. It puts you a little bit behind, but it's safe to do that. However, what happens on this on this walking steps? Okay, so what happens here? Well, I can say that slowing it down, I think it's probably a good educated guess to say that this is step 2. Because Cloud's right foot is his even numbered steps, and that's the earliest one. And so if we were to count that, the deal is that how many steps do you have to take after this fight? You have to take 17 and like 3/4. You have to take almost 18, like 17 and 3/4 is what's perfect. So if we operate under this being step 2, then it would be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and then watch this. Starts running right here. This is like 1 or 2 frames less than what you need. So, firstly, I think it's unlikely that a newer runner who's struggling to keep up on steps would be able to buffer walking out of the fight and then perfectly count within a couple frames what the how many steps they need, and then it gets better. After they underwalk this by like 1 or 2 frames, right here, boom, correction. Did you see this? Right here, they do a couple of walking frames. They start running, they do a couple of walking frames. Look, this is possible to do. You might buffer out of the fight and happen to count correctly. You might realize that it looked a frame off and correct it. You might do that. But I think with the other supporting evidence that Big Shoes was used, that a RAM visualizer was used during the run, I think it's more likely that they used the visualizer in order to do those steps. I think it's more likely that they did something kind of like this, where if we were trying to get under this encounter, we're just looking at the visualizer right here while we do the walking, and then we time an X press right there to try to get under it. But if we time our X press, so like here, you see the buffer in with the walking, and then if we time it too early, oh, we can do a little correction like that. So did you see the correction that I just did? Maybe my camera was covering it. But when I hit X and that red dot still existed, meaning I didn't walk enough, I can just release and repress X real quick in order to drop it off. I find this interesting. It's very highly conjecture, but it's an interesting thing to add when there's already evidence pointing to them using the visualizer. And lastly, once again, to be super clear about why I think that they're using the visualizer and not just doing a RAM edit, it is because on this field, after they didn't walk enough here, I think that they tried to walk under this encounter in this room once again, and then once we got to the future dungeon where the danger updates, I believe that it was the visualizer that tipped them off to the fact that they didn't walk enough. And then that's what cued them to come in here and implement the RAM edit in order to fix it. So that's why I think that this was used and a RAM edit was used. We have more corroborating evidence, all right? This is going to start tinfoil hat, but I frame by framed it, and I believe we have a second RAM edit. And it's the very next encounter. So on this screen, I started watching the run right after the cheat, and I noticed something odd. Here's the deal. On this part of the run, you have a temperature gauge that you need to not let hit 26. Now, the thing is, on this first climbing section, and everybody knows this, you do not have to shiver in order to warm yourself back up on this screen. If you just go through with relatively fast movement, you will get through no problem. Tiki makes a very odd choice here, though, which is to stop and shiver immediately. First of all, we don't have to shiver. Secondly, if you're going to, why would it be right now and not when you're about to freeze? You would think that you would have to make some kind of mistake in order to feel like you need to shiver, and then maybe on this platform or maybe on this platform is when the mistake will make your degrees start to get kind of low. Again, 26 is what they need to hit for you to fail this section. That's when you would expect to see a shiver, is like on this platform or this platform, but they shivered right away. And here's where it gets interesting, is that then this is the final climb. This is the cave right here that we're trying to get into, and it's very important. I mean, it's kind of important that you don't get a fight before you get into this cave, because the enemy that's out here is a lot slower than the enemy that's in there, and so it's better to get the fight in the cave. And if you're behind, you get punished. Look at this, though. As they're making the final climb up toward the cave, they stop climbing for some reason. And then they continue. What were they doing while Cloud was still there? Why would you just stop climbing and then start climbing again? And so if we put these two things together, it really makes you think maybe the reason that they stopped and shivered back here was in order to build up enough extra time loss leeway on their temperature, because they know that they're going to have to take their hand off the controller, or they know that they're going to have to stop moving for a second in order to perform a RAM edit. They're giving themselves some extra time, because right here, in order to bring their step ID back, in order to have better steps, they're going to stop right here, make the cheat engine change, or whatever RAM editor they used, and then they can go forward, get into the cave, and they get their encounter right here. Well, so I thought, yeah, their movement was kind of sloppy. They were already behind. I didn't think that they would make it into the cave, and I was surprised that they did. And so, also with that suspicious behavior, I went through on emulator. I got the fight where they last got it. I recreated all of their movement all the way up to the cave right here, and I got the encounter immediately upon exiting that climb. I got recreating their movement frame by frame and giving them all of the benefits of the doubt along the way that they did certain things optimally. I got the encounter right away. So you'd be saying, okay, well, how did they pull it off then? How easy is this cheat? Did they just drop their danger again? Well, no. The danger is why they avoided an entire encounter last time. This time, they're getting the same encounter, they're just getting it later than they should. And the way that you would do that is, you can see we're just about to hit this encounter, and step ID is the bookmark on the RNG table of how many numbers we've burned through. And so if we poke this and just bump it back, let's bump it back 5 steps, that's a lot. So this will probably put me too far ahead. But if we just bump it back 5 steps and then run in, then we get the encounter right there, you see? So maybe they were just a little bit more modest about where they bumped it back to. So let's try giving themselves like 3 steps by bumping it like that, and then you would finish your climb, and wouldn't you know it, we got the fight exactly where they got it by doing that. Right here, now we go to their run submission, and we see where do they, well, first of all, you can see it in the frame by frame right here, but then after the battle is complete, it is right here. So that's where they got the fight. So the very next encounter, after recreating their movement pretty much frame by frame. I think that the reason that they stopped and shivered on that room was to buy themselves time to then stop mid climb and bump their step ID back to give themselves 3 step IDs, which is 24 frames of movement leeway extra. So there you go. The very I think the very next encounter was also cheated. So on to my conclusion then. I believe since I do believe that we have caught Tiki Liger tampering with their game in a submitted run, I believe that all of Tiki Liger's runs are now subject to re-verification, right? I think that has to be done, right? They've been caught cheating in one game, and so all of their runs are subject to re-verification if the moderators of whatever game it is are so inclined, you know? I would very much understand a moderator saying, if they were caught cheating in one game, we just reject their runs, right? I could understand that. Or they would just be up for re-verification. If you can look through it, there's nothing fishy about it, you really think it's legit, boom, re-verify it. Go ahead. However, the fact that Tiki deleted every single one of their runs, every single one of their videos, means that their runs can't be re-verified because the video proof is gone. And in my opinion, any run that no longer has video proof at the time that it needs verification can only be assumed to be illegitimate. What I have done in the FF7 board is I have updated all of their previously verified runs to rejected with the reason that they were caught cheating. Thus, their runs at least need to be re-verified, and their runs can't be re-verified because the videos have been deleted. Thus, they have all been updated to rejected. Other moderators of other games can choose to do what they see fit, but that's my opinion. That's my conclusion. One last thing that I want to throw out as far as the cheating methodology is concerned is that there is one way in-game to reduce your danger to 0, which would cause the encounter outcome that we saw. Only the first encounter, not the second one that I also said was RAM edited. This only applies to the missing encounter. However, it requires that you save and load your game. You have to return to the title screen and then load your game in order to drop your danger to 0. So that would have required Tiki to stop and save their game and then either soft reset or get into a battle and game over to get back to the title screen and then load their game. And that would have resulted, again, in the encounters in the spots that we saw. However, yeah, they clearly did not do that in the video. So they would have had to have done that and then spliced it out in order for that to be the way that they cheated here. And I just think that splicing is way, way, way higher effort on an emulator run than poking a RAM address is. Okay, I forgot to add here that I actually did check for splices, though. When I thought of this methodology, I did check for splices just to be complete, and there were no splices. That part of it is fine. And again, splicing out a quit and reload to drop your danger would only explain the missing encounter. The second encounter that I said happened too far back, and they must have RAM edited their steps as well to give themselves more leeway. They would have had to do more splicing of different things in order to get that to happen. It's not that. But also, speaking of that, I think that does speak to, like, it speaks something about the legitimacy of their other runs, because in my opinion, this is a very low effort cheat. It's something that is very easy to do because, like I said, it's using tools that everybody knows how to use in practice and just deciding to kind of just cheat a little bit on the side as they're doing a normal run. You know what I mean? Like when somebody splices, there's so much more premeditation, so much more work involved, and to me that feels more deceitful, a spliced run. And this is not that. This is somebody who's doing runs and they're just cheating a little bit on the side for a little bit of help. And the thing is, like, I don't think that that's possible in every game that they ran. So I think that that's worth noting. That personally, I don't really think that it represents their entire speedrun catalog. But yeah, the fact that they deleted everything, though, the fact that without a word, they didn't respond to my DM, they didn't say a word to me or anybody that I've talked to. They just nuked their entire YouTube channel, which to me, it means one of two things. It can either mean that so much of their speedrun catalog is cheated that the stuff that's legitimate, if it exists, doesn't even matter, you know? Like if someone's cheated 50% of their stuff, then the other 50% doesn't matter that it's legitimate anymore, right? It could mean that, or it could mean that FF7 was an isolated incident. They're just so embarrassed and afraid basically of this video and of just them getting dragged, and they don't want to deal with everybody pouring through every one of their other runs looking for things that are sus, you know what I mean? Ooh, why did they do this little thing in this run and this little thing in that run? And now everyone's hyper analyzing just like little mistakes that they made and stuff in every other run and acting like they're all sus. Maybe they just maybe FF7 was an isolated incident and they just wanted to save the embarrassment of all of that happening. Who knows? Because they deleted everything. And to me, it's sad because they ran a lot of games. And like clearly there's someone who loves gaming, loves speedrunning. And there's even a video, there's even an archived video of them doing a win back run live in a marathon. And in the background, you see racks of games and stuff, and like this person's a gamer, you know. And on this curio shelf back here, they've even got like a Cloud and Aeris plushie and a Cloud and Aeris figurine, and multiple copies of FF7, and like it makes this fucking heartbreaking, dude. That we're here. It makes it heartbreaking that we're here. So yeah. Anyway, that's kind of my conclusion. That's kind of where we end this. Is heartbroken, you know. But at the very least, I mean, I don't know. At the very least, it is content, right? Some of you enjoyed this video a lot. There's something about us where we love a technical breakdown about why something is impossible and how something was tampered with in a competitive setting, right? That's just something that's like dramatically interesting to hear and learn about, right? So like, yeah, hopefully it was an interesting video that you enjoyed. But I'm a little heartbroken. Anyway, well, hope you have a good one. That's it. See ya.